What's your favorite Bad Bunny song?
I already got one. Sorry about that.
I don't know who that is.
I never heard of Bad Bunny.
I don't know who that is.
I heard performing at halftime.
But yeah, I don't know who that is.
I don't know no Bad Bunny song.
Do you think they made a mistake?
I believe so. I ain't never heard of bro till now.
I don't have one.
I don't listen to him.
I don't know any song.
Oh, what the heck's it called? I blank out the name.
I don't think I have one.
I don't know Bad Bunny song.
That's a tough one.
I don't have one.
I don't really listen to that, but I can't lie.
I really do not know any.
I haven't listened to any songs.
So, since everyone's giving their opinion on this, I suppose let's discuss the halftime show wars between Turning Point USA and Bad Bunny at the Super Bowl. It's interesting because on the right wing, I feel like there's a range of opinions. Some people absolutely despised it. Others are saying, well, maybe it wasn't so bad. I actually quite liked it. And then on the other hand, we have the leftists who are trying to universally mock and ridicule what Turning Point did. Oh, Kid Rock, he hasn't been relevant in 30 years. Look at these conservatives attempting to make culture. What a joke. And my take on this overall is, first and foremost, as it pertains to Bad Bunny, I don't think it's necessarily relevant whether you like the performance personally or not, you like his music or not. That's your subjective opinion. For me, what I notice about this is the bigger picture of what it's supposed to all represent, right? The agenda that they subtly try to push by doing these types of things, which certainly is there. It's worth talking about and it's worth noticing. Now, am I here to have a big hysterical triggered meltdown about it? Can you believe that they were speaking Spanish? No, but it is worth pointing out what they're trying to do here, right? So we'll talk about that. But then secondly, I think also that when you look at the overall viewership, which was very high of the Turning Point event, somewhere it looks like between 40 to 80 million views. We'll explain why we come up with that math here in a second. It's hard to deny that what the conservative side tried to do here was completely insignificant, not relevant at all whatsoever. I understand that's what leftists are trying to do. Who's watching Kid Rock? Who cares? You know, this is like just some lame attempt to create culture like they've been doing for the past 20 years. But frankly, this is yet another sign that actually, you know, people on our side do exist in this country, and they're actually growing in cultural power and cultural popularity. You know, as growing up in Los Angeles, as one example, you know, it was a trend for years as a child to, you know, mock country music, mock that culture, and it was always this thing that's perceived to be very small and closed off. But you're noticing something nowadays. I don't know if people have paid attention, but this genre, and by the way, the politics and just culture associated with it, has become extremely huge in America. And that also coincides largely with the population boom that the once backwater, poor southern states are now gaining on liberal states, right? So I don't think it's actually coincidence. As southern conservative states gain population, gain new people, gain like a new economy and power in this country, and as the formerly cosmopolitan liberal power centers like New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco are beginning to depopulate, that this type of stuff is becoming more and more culturally relevant. And yes, I do think it's worth talking about. And yes, if I were on the left wing, which I'm not, it would not entirely be something that's just worth ridiculing or laughing off immediately. But anyways, we'll talk about all of this, guys. So let's kind of go over, right, I guess the turning point of that, Bad Bunny, all of that in today's video. First, though, guys, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate the support, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all the latest news and coverage. And that said, as it pertains to the Bad Bunny show, I guess let us start by sharing the president's opinion on it, because why not? So he said that the Super Bowl halftime show is absolutely terrible, one of the worst ever. I honestly, I'll be honest, I thought the one last year was a little worse, but we'll talk about that. Okay. It makes no sense, is an affront to the greatness of America, and doesn't represent our standards of success, creativity, or excellence. No one understands a word this guy is saying, and the dancing is disgusting, especially for young children that are watching from throughout the USA. I mean, that part is, I guess, pretty true, and all over the world. This show is just a slap in the face to our country, which is setting new standards and records every day, including the best stock market, all of that. There's nothing inspirational about this mess of a halftime show, and watch, it will get great reviews from the fake news media because they haven't got a clue what is going on in the real world. And by the way, the NFL should immediately replace its ridiculous new kickoff rule, Make America Great Again. So let me tell you how I guess I feel about the halftime show, and you know, you're free to be entitled to your own opinion. As I said previously, it's not a huge issue for me. But okay, so here's where I stand. As it pertains to the performance and the music itself, I didn't think it was overall that bad in a certain context, right? Like, I have no inherent problem with Spanish or Latin music. It's groovy, it's catchy, I'll give it that. Again, that was never my issue with it. My issue was always big picture that, hey, this is the biggest cultural event in the United States. And by the way, it's a very exclusive event to the United States, right? Most other countries don't enjoy the Super Bowl or our form of football. And so, yeah, it is objectively pretty odd to go to a primarily American English-speaking audience and say, oh, let's put up a singer here who does not sing in English at all whatsoever. And then his whole performance, half of it is like telling a story of Latin American countries that have nothing to do with the United States, right? It doesn't really seem to fit the picture. And I mean, frankly, I think it's part of this greater attempt to, normalize, I guess, the idea you could call it of multiculturalism or something in the United States, this idea to like shift off and, hey, it's perfectly okay if people don't speak English in your country. It's just that's sort of what I notice about it. It feels like it's normalizing this idea. But then even from a marketing perspective, really, you're going to basically almost spit in the face of the viewership by saying, yeah, let's show you this singer from Puerto Rico who doesn't speak English and you can't understand. And by the way, okay, fine, his songs are in English. Even the parts where he's getting up there speaking to the crowd in between the songs, he's still speaking in Spanish. He couldn't even say that part in English. So, that's just my whole thing about it. It doesn't make sense. And it's hard not to look at the timing of all of it and say, yeah, it was kind of done as an FU to, I guess, just the current population of the United States of America, right? And I'm sure some smug leftist would come and say, oh, well, but Puerto Rico is part of the United States, so how can you say it's not celebrating American culture? And it's like, yeah, I know that. I'm not stupid. But I'm sorry, is the event taking place in Puerto Rico? Is it even meant to appeal to a primarily Puerto Rican audience? No, it's not, right? And that's our whole point here. I'm not in any way saying that Bad Bunny is an irrelevant person. Like, who is this? Because factually speaking, he's not. He's extremely popular around the world, but is his primary fan base even located in the United States? I would say no, actually. I think he'd probably be much more fitting to have him perform, for example, at the World Cup than something exclusively American. And Trump does have a point that, well, historically, I mean, it's probably gone downhill for years now, but historically, right, the entire purpose of a Super Bowl halftime show is to, I would argue it's like it's a display of American popular culture. And so it is saying something. And I think that's, by the way, for people who don't get it, that's why conservatives are upset about this, is that it is saying something that, hey, our culture now is people who sing and speak in a completely different language than English and, are basically doing this whole display meant to represent other countries than the United States, So that's the point at which, well, when you boil up everything, all of the outrage over immigration and lack of assimilation and all the day-to-day issues you face in this country, for example, right? And just maybe the general frustration that people feel walking around, engaging with business and all this, and just constantly encountering people who can't speak the language of the country within their country, then yeah, that all boils over to say, okay, maybe in a certain context, this feels like it's part of the greater propaganda agenda, which I would argue to an extent it is, right? So anyways, that's sort of my whole take on the whole Bad Bunny thing. But that said, whatever, frankly, your opinion is on it, we're primarily here to talk about, I guess, the countercultural battle between Turning Point and Bad Bunny, right? Because Turning Point USA Tonight tried to do an event with Kid Rock and some other people meant to be an alternative, right? A right-wing, patriotic, godly alternative to the Bad Bunny performance. And to make a long story short, I would just first of all point out that the viewership was staggeringly high. When I went and checked in, and I watched both halftime shows, by the way, just for, the research and preparing for this video. The live concurrent viewership, when I was checking in, was close to 4.9, even 5 million views. It nearly got to that point. And if you know anything about a live stream on YouTube, that's basically just the amount of people who are watching in that very second. So when you count up everyone who is coming in or out, as someone who does content, by the way, myself personally, I would estimate, frankly, the viewership of this is probably somewhere around 30 to 40 million views, just given, what I know about streaming, what that means when you have a certain number of people watching live. YouTube takes a very long time to update the actual viewership here on, the screen. So currently it's saying 18 million, but it's a high number, undeniably, right? I asked ChatGPT, by the way, they estimated, based on the math, is probably somewhere closer to 80 million. So let's just say anywhere from 20 to 30 million people to 80 million people watch the show. Well, undeniably, again, leftists can sit there, they can make fun of that, but that's objectively a lot of people, right? And it does show something, that the protest against whatever agenda people felt like they were being forced down right here was large, it was significant, and a lot of people preferred this halftime show over the Bad Bunny one, right? That's undeniable. And I think, as I was kind of hinting at in the beginning, the fact that an event that maybe 10 years ago would be ridiculed, right? Who are these conservatives trying to create counterculture? Now is something that is very high in viewership and arguably even rivaling the Super Bowl itself, does perhaps represent on a bigger picture, again, how the influence of conservatives in the culture, even if it's still countercultural, which it is, right? I'm not claiming that we run Hollywood or we run the institutions or something like that, is beginning to grow, right? And look, again, you can laugh at it, you can ridicule it all you want, but it's very hard to deny that there is not a large and growing market for this alternative side of the culture. I'll tell you a true story, actually, as a matter of fact. I don't know if anyone remembers this, but back in 2024, Kid Rock did his whole Rock the Country tour. Anybody remember that? And especially to people my age, it's like Kid Rock, what is this, 30 years ago, right? But noticeably, I don't know how many people recall this or went to those. Maybe you saw them. Maybe it came to your town, whatever. Those events were massive. They were huge, right? You look at these videos, right? The crowds went on for literally miles in some cases. I don't know how to count people, that well, but looks like 50 to 100,000 people. It was massive. I went to college at the University of Florida in Gainesville, Florida. And I remember he did a concert in Ocala, which is the town just south of us. Huge, right? I actually thought of going because I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I'll go check it out. And in the end, we couldn't even get a ticket. It was like that massive. And then you saw how huge these things were. Massive, 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 right? But why am I bringing that up? Oh, Kid Rock is suddenly making a comeback of being relevant, I guess, in American culture. This is why. Is that I remember seeing the size and the energy and sort of the momentum behind that concert tour and thinking to myself, we're going to win the election. And I know that sounds like, oh, what are you talking about? Here's why I say that, is because you're obviously talking about a genre of music, but also the culture behind it, right? And I don't know whether you want to say Kid Rock is country or rock or a little bit of both, but undeniably, he represents a genre and an identity and a culture that everybody knows is associated with a more conservative, rural, often Southern type of American. This is undeniable, right? He's not a cosmopolitan Los Angeles liberal by any means. Okay, sure, we understand all of that. Well, I think it's worth pointing out just how big, for example, country music has become, right? And you might just say, okay, Vince, that's a random cultural phenomenon. What are you talking about? I would argue no, right? It's actually very closely connected to political and cultural shifts that you even saw manifest themselves, for example, back in the 2024 election. What are we talking about? Well, let me just give you another example before I explain myself. Nashville, as one example, right? It's always popular, it's always music city for country, but has grown huge, right? Now it's not just a Southern thing. It's not just a regional thing. It's not just you've come from a small town, right? Everybody now wants in on country music. I remember watching the New Year's Eve celebrations. I did like the split screen on YouTube TV just to see what's going on. Kid you not, this past year, Nashville's crowd is bigger than the New York crowd. Or the New York ball dropping. That's the biggest event ever. No, Nashville now is bigger, actually. And it's attended by more people. It's watched by more people. What does this mean? Does it just mean that everybody's becoming cowboys or something? No, it's particularly happening. Why? Because, for example, as the population, keep this in mind, as the population in America shifts out of the formerly powerful and dominant, what we might call cosmopolitan urban centers of liberal American culture, think, for example, Los Angeles, New York City, San Francisco, places like that, and it's no secret that states in the geographical South, you know, the formerly just poor, backwards, conservative areas are growing a lot, right? People are moving there. New economies are being born. You're not just talking about political dominance, which, by the way, is very real, right? You know, you talk all the time about how the 2030 census is going to be brutal for Democrats because people are leaving northern states, they're leaving blue states, they're coming to southern states. That's going to matter when it comes to political apportionment. But I would also argue that also largely is to blame or attribute for perhaps the cultural shift you're seeing at the same time. You notice that? So I know it's sort of a crackpot political theory, but I would actually argue that the popularity of things like a Kid Rock concert or country music and watching it grow is symbolic of how, on a greater picture, demographics and populations are shifting in this country to favor conservatives more and more. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? And you can see some cultural signs of this, right? Beyonce as one example. Suddenly transitions, one of the most famous pop singers in history, transitions to try to do a country album to stay relevant. Post Malone, one of the biggest rappers among my generation. Now he's a country singer. Like, this stuff is absolutely real. And perhaps it's hard to understand if you're one of the people I described, right? Someone who lives in the bubble of cosmopolitan liberalism. You never really leave New York City or Los Angeles. And when you travel, it's just to go to another cosmopolitan liberal center. You can look at this and say, well, nobody cares about this. How on earth are tens of millions of people interested? How did the viewership genuinely create a legitimate rivalry with the Super Bowl itself? That's how. Because quietly, while you have been projecting that, oh, we're still Hollywood, we still have total cultural dominance, slowly your population numbers and the people who maybe would engage in your cultures and your economies have been doing what? They've been shifting south. They've been shifting to rural areas. They've been shifting, let me just say, to what we could call, right, just country music country, you know? I guess that's kind of redundant, but you know what I mean, right? The parts of the country that would favor country music. And as that happens, that doesn't just mean country music is bigger than ever. It doesn't just mean that the genre is growing and now the crowds and the concerts are massive. It also means, yes, that because of the way the electoral college and apportionment works, political power is moving to those places as well and away from your cosmopolitan liberal areas. So that's the point I would make about all of this, right? So again, liberals, you can laugh at it, you can really ridicule it. It's the start of something, I understand. You know, this has never really been attempted on a mainstream scale before. But again, ridicule it, laugh it off at your own peril. Because undeniably, this viewership is huge. And it does represent something, right? It represents a fatigue, I guess, that people in this country have for your type of culture. They're searching for something different. And culture is very powerful, right? Culture very closely determines, on top of it, what a person's beliefs and attitudes are going to be, which further translate to what? Their political decisions at the ballot box. Just saying. Just something to keep in mind. But anyways, guys, there you have it. That said, let me know your thoughts, right? That's basically my take on this whole Super Bowl situation. Let me know yours. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.